Hi, this is video 2, drawing 2, and lesson 2 of my Inktober drawing and video series. If you have not viewed the Introduction to Inkscape and Zentangles video, you should do that before viewing this, particularly if you are new to Inkscape or new to Zentangles. This video is going to feature the pattern Cubine. First I will show you how to create the pattern, then I will use the pattern in a drawing. To start, I want to point out the snapping tools to you. They're along the right side of my window. This icon turns the tools on and off. I want them on. By default, the Snap to Grids function is turned on. I want to turn on the Snap to Page function because we're going to be snapping to either the page or the grid. I'm now ready to get started, and here we have an example of the pattern Cubine. So I'm going to start drawing it. I'll start with the rectangle tool. I'm going to come up here, and the little bubble that forms, that bubble tells me what I'm snapping to. And that'll lay down the corner of my rectangle exactly at that point. And I want it to snap to the page corner. There it is. Click. And then I'm going to drag here. And then I want this to snap to this grid intersection. Click. And there I have my rectangle. I'm going to click on my selector tool, select it, and then click on my canvas so that nothing is selected. I'm going to come back down here and click on my rectangle tool again. Then I'm going to zoom in so we can see exactly what's going on. I want to put a little square here, and the rectangle I created, it looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares across and 6 squares down. So I want to cover 3 squares across and 3 squares down. So I click on the rectangle tool, I move to that intersection, and then when the little bubble says handle to grid intersection, I click and I drag out to this corner. Unfortunately, in this case, I do not want it to snap. I want it to, I want my rectangle to cover that area, but I don't want it to go over. So I'm going to release my mouse right there. I'm going to click the selectors tool and click on the canvas just so nothing is selected. These outlines here, they're called the stroke, and so this area here is a stroke, and this little square here, it's also a stroke. Anything that goes in the interior of the stroke is called a fill, and I want to fill this with the color black. So I just select this object and click the color black down here, and that'll give that a black fill. I'm going to click this icon, zoom to fit page in window. That'll put the page in the window. So let's come back over here and look at Cubine. Looks like we have a diagonal line here and vertical lines here. So I'm going to click on my pin tool. the pen tool has several modes. It doesn't have a mood, it just has a modes. Just has modes. So it has several modes, and I'm going to use this mode and this mode. I'm going to call this mode the straight mode, and in the straight mode I can create lines that are either horizontal, vertical, or diagonal. Okay. And I'm going to call this mode the horizontal and vertical mode. And in this mode, I can create lines that are either horizontal or vertical. And the benefit of this mode is that those lines, those horizontal or vertical lines, will be perfectly straight up and down or straight across. Okay, so I need a diagonal line right here. So I'll click the straight icon, come back over here to my zoom tool. Let's zoom in so we can see things a little better. So we click the pen tool, select the straight icon, and then click. And again, we don't want to go outside of this box here. We want to make sure we stay in the box. And we'll click and drag to the corner here. And I'm going to click right on that where it says handle to grid intersection. And let go, press enter, and I have my line. Then I'm going to come over here and change to the horizontal and vertical mode. Click. Let's start at the bottom. And again, I do not want to go outside the box. I want to stay in the box, but I don't want my line to be too short. But I definitely don't want it to be too long. So I'll click there, come up, and when I'm over the line, the diagonal line, I'll release my mouse button and press enter, and I'll repeat the same thing here, and release the mouse button and press enter, and then I'll click on the canvas. Okay. I'll click the fit page and window icon. Come over here and look. It looks like these two things look just alike. Except this is a series of columns and rows. We're in luck. I'm going to come up here and give you a little bit of a lesson. We're in luck because we can use Inkscape's Create Tiled Clones feature. But before we do that, I want you to understand a few things. A duplicate is an exact copy of an original. Here's a square. It's decorated it a little bit. And if I click on it and then click this icon, it creates a duplicate. When Inkscape creates a duplicate, it places it on top of the original. You can move the duplicate. So, this is my original, this is my duplicate, it's an exact copy. Changes you make to the original do not affect the duplicate and vice versa. So I can come in here, and I'll double click on that, and I'll delete that little circle. Nothing happens here. I'll come over here, I'll double click until this is selected. I'll delete that little circle. Nothing happens here. these two objects, they are completely independent objects. I can do anything I want with this, anything I want with this, any change I make to this doesn't affect this, so forth and so on. And I can change my duplicate any way I want. Let's see, I'm going to pull this. Whoa. Huh? My duplicate had two squares. Well, I didn't know that, but in any case, I can make any change I want to my duplicate, and it has no effect on my original. So that's what you should know. Now, a clone. A clone is an exact copy of the original, and it's also placed on top of the original. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to select this object, and then I'm going to click Create a Clone. So Inkscape created a clone, and it placed it on top of the original. I can move the clone. Okay? But here's what's new and different from a duplicate. With the exception of moving the original, any change you make to the original is also made to the clone. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to double click on that. And then I think I'll give that a red fill. Look what happened. This has a red fill too. I'm going to, this is selected. I'm going to delete it. It's also deleted from the clone. I can move, scale, and to scale, if I drag, let me back up a little. When you select an object with the selector tool, these arrows appear around it. I can use these arrows on the sides to make the object larger. I'm going to undo that. And I can use these arrows on the corner. That should make it larger proportionately. But it didn't, but that's okay. The point is that I can drag these arrows and change the shape of my object. If I click the object again, I get these arrows. I can skew, come back here. If I click the corner arrow, I can rotate the object. And on the side arrows, if I drag them, I can skew the object. And the point that I'm trying to make here is I can do all those things to the clone, but I can't make any other changes to it. I cannot come in here and change the color. I can't, I just can't do anything else. That's it. I can move, scale, rotate, and skew. Oh, yeah. And if the color is in the original set to unset, you could change the color. And we're not going to worry about that until later on in the lessons. But, yeah, those are the only things I can do to it. I cannot make any other changes to this. However, any change that I make up here will also appear down here. So let's see. I'm going to click this again and skew. This is skewed. Come back here. Let's see. Rotate. This is rotated. So that's the difference between a duplicate and a clone. Now, tiled clones. You're going to clone the object, and then you can create a system of columns and rows. And that system of columns and rows can be patterned in a variety of ways, and you'll see that later. You can also create other patterns. We're not going to concern ourselves with that now. And the tile must be a single object or be grouped. Right. So let's come down here and look at our Cubine. It is not a single object. Each one of these things, this line, this line, this line, this this box, and this line, even if I can't select it, and this box, each of them is an object in and of themselves. So we want to create a set of tiled clones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them, all of those objects. They're all selected, and then I'm going to group them. So I click Object, Group. So now Inkscape can look at them as if they were a single object. And it's not only grouped, it's selected. I can tell it has those arrows around it and the dotted line bounded box. So I'll click Edit, Clone, Create Tiled Clone. And that opened up my Create Tiled Clones dialog box. And in this field, I want to use simple translation, because that'll cause me to just create a system of columns and rows just like this. And I want 10 columns and 10 rows, so I don't need to make a change here. I want to come down here and click the Reset button. What that does is if in a previous session I made a change to any of these tabs, clicking this Reset button will set these back to their defaults. I'm now going to click Create, and voila, that's the magic. I now have my pattern, Cubine. Now, this button right here, if I click it, it will remove all my clones, and I can click Create again to recreate them. Now, as we said, when you create a clone, it's placed on top of the original. That's no different when you create a tiled clone. You can see that something is selected here, and what is selected is my original. What I want to do is click this button. That'll move my original from the bottom to the top, and then drag my original out. And if I click my nodes tool, if it's able to select things, I know that's my original, because look here, nothing happens here because I can't make any changes to any of these on my clone. So now that I have that pulled out, I'm going to click my selector tool, click my sample pattern, and pull that down. And bring this over here. And then I'm going to click this icon. It'll allow me to enter some text. So I'll click it. The only thing I want you to, I don't want to spend a lot of time on text because we're here to draw, but I want you to note that I have Times New Roman selected as my font, and I selected it because it's on most computers. You can select it too. This is set to normal, This is set to, actually it's set to 28. I don't know why it appears 2799, but set to 28. And over here I have this field, the AA field. It determines the spacing between letters. At 0, it's just too close for my taste, so I set that to 3. And with that bit of information, I'm going to click here and type the word, I should say words, original clone. So here's my original clone. Here's my pattern. And the beauty of Inkscape is this. Now that I've created this pattern, I can save it and use it over and over again anytime I want. I don't have to ever recreate it again. So what I'm going to do is click here, click File, and then click Save. That opens up my Save dialog box. I'm going to click Inktober because I created this folder called Inktober for all of my Inktober endeavors. I'm then going to click the Patterns folder. I'm going to name the pattern Cubine. So whenever I'm looking for the Cubine pattern, I can find it. Inkscape automatically puts an SVG extension on that file name, and that's the extension I want. It'll allow me to reopen this file and make any modifications I want to it. I'll click Save, and my file is ready to use. I've opened up a new window, and I set my document properties, and I'm going to use this window to create my drawing. I still have the window for my Cubine pattern opened, and before I start my drawing, there was something I forgot to do here. So I'm just going to do that, and then we'll get to the drawing. Not only do I like to pull out the original clone, I also like to make a copy of one of the clones. So I'll click the copy icon, that's this one, and then I'll paste it right here, and I can right click and bring up a little menu and it'll paste. So I have a copy of one of the clones here, and you'll see I can't make any changes to it. It's a clone also of this, so if I make a copy of a clone, it's also a clone. But I don't want this to be a clone, and you can do this anytime. If you have something that's a clone and you no longer want it to be a clone, you can unlink it. So to do that, I'll click Edit, Clone, Unlink Clone. So now all of these things are clones, and let's see, I can prove that by rotating this, and all these rotate. I'll undo that, but notice this one did not rotate. So this is this, and this one I can make changes to. Now you can see. So this one is not a clone. This is an unlinked clone, and we'll mark it as such. So we have our original clone, we have our unlinked clones, and we have our pattern. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this again, copy, and then I'm going to bring it over to my new window and paste it. Paste. So now we have it. And I'm going to use this to make my drawing. My drawing is also going to be based on tiled clones. So I'll click Edit, Clone, Create Tiled Clones to open up my Create Tiled Clones dialog box. When I press this down arrow, you'll see I have actually 17 choices here. And each of these represents a way that I can tile is the word. And tiling is defined as covering a surface with the same shape. So I'll start with a shape and then I'll cover the surface with that shape. And what we've already done when we used the simple translation is we started with a rectangle and it covered an area. And several of these methods use a rectangle, but some of them use other shapes. We'll get into most of these, if not all of them, in some detail in the days to come. So I'm not going to really explain it a lot now, but I am going to tell you that for the design I'm creating today, instead of using simple translation like we did when we created our the page with our pattern, this time I'm going to use 180-degree rotation. Okay, and it just happens to have the figures here. I'm going to create my tile clones. I want 6 rows and 6 columns, and you should note I put this right here. Let's see. This is to the third one down and the third one across. That wasn't an accident. That's where I want it. And I'm going to double check to make sure it clicks in place, although that's not as important for this. I'm going to click my reset button and I'm going to see what P2 180-degree rotation will do for me. So I'll click create. Oops, I need to have this selected. Click create. And there we have it. That's the design I want to use. I don't think you can see it, but I can see it, and you'll be able to see it too when you're working on your own. There's a seam here, and one of the reasons when we were creating our design, and a seam is just a gap between there, is a lighter, you can just see it, and it's not my grid line. Let's see, view, page grid. If I turn that off, I can still see it. One of the reasons why when I was creating my Cubine, I was just so careful, I just did not want to go outside of the box, is because if something sticks out that box just a little bit, it'll cause a seam. And there's a hole here. There's a hole at every corner. You can see it right there. And I know what the reason for that is. And I might be able to fix it. what I'm going to do is show you how to fix it. The whole. As you know, we created our tiled clones, and our clone is in the back. I've clicked off of it, but there's another little trick you should know. If I ever want to find it again, I just select any clone, doesn't matter, and then I click Edit, Clone, Select Original. Now I've got my original clone. You'll see here, if I want to remove everything, I can. Anytime the original is selected, you can remove all of the clones. And if I want to recreate, I can create. But what I really want is to pull my original out. And remember, it's underneath the clone, so I have to bring it to the top and then drag it out. I'd like to have my grid back on. So I'm going to click View, Page Grid. That turns the grid back on. So there I have it. This is my original, and I test it that way. Yeah, I can make changes to it. That's the original. And I said I can tell you why we have that little hole there. I'm going to click here. That opens up my fill and stroke dialog box. Then I'm going to click on the stroke style. And we have a stroke style here of join. We're using a round join. I come over here. Now remember, any change I make to this is going to change here. If I come over here and click on the miter join, oops, no, we didn't want that. Edit, undo, set stroke. We want ours to be set at 2 pixels. That also changed the width. That's not what I wanted. I want to keep it at 2 pixels, but I want to change to a miter join. So I'm going to click this now. And we'll go back in here. It looks like the hole is still there. Doesn't look like it's a miter join. Let me see what's going on. Now, back over here. Okay, yeah, that did it. Changed it to a miter join. And you can see that little hole closed up. But I still have this line here. And to be honest with you, sometimes no matter what you do, you still end up with a seam. And here's the little trick that I use. I hold down my object is selected. I hold down my Alt key and press the greater than key. Yeah, selected. I hold down my Alt key, it's got to be selected, and I press the greater than key. And that will close up all of my gaps. That looks much nicer. I know you can't see it, but like I said, when you're working on your own project, you will be able to see it, and you won't like it. So, there we have it. So now this is the design I want. That's what I'm going to keep it. I can now get rid of this. This is my original. and I clicked it and I selected it and pressed my delete key. So now we have our basic design for our project. And so what I want to do is just put some borders on it and give it a white background, and we'll be done. So I'm going to click on the rectangle tool. I want to snap to my page, so I'll activate the snapping to page option. I'll come up here and I'm going to look for snap to page border corner to be exact, or it's actually page corner. That's what it said. Bring this down here, and then I'm going to come down here and snap to, again, page corner. I might have to settle for grid intersection, which is exactly where the page corner should be, and that's what I'm going to do. Alrighty, so I have a border around my page. I think I'll create another one. I'll click here, I'll snap to this grid intersection, come down here, snap to this grid intersection. That looks good. Now, remember before when I had the width in here, it was 3 point something something pixels. We like our default of 2. I can come here and increase the number of pixels, or I can even come down here. Oops. And if I right click and change it to 6, now we have a border of 6. Notice it changed here. So that we can either use the fill and stroke dialog box to set our width, or we can come down here, right click to open up this menu and set it here. When you do that, make sure this is set to pixels, because we're working in pixels. Well, that looks good. I'm going to try one more. I'm going to come here. 1, 2, 3. And gonna put that right there. Yeah. Maybe this page border here, I'll make it 4. Yeah. So there I have it. There's my piece of art. I was going to create a layer like we did on day 1, but instead I'm going to do something else just to illustrate something to you. I'm going to select this rectangle here, and I'm going to give it a white fill. And look, my drawing disappeared, and that's because things are layered. The first thing you draw is on the bottom layer, and things are layered within layers, and we'll talk about this concept again in days to come, but things are layered within layers. You remember when we were working with our clone, we had to bring it to the top. Well, now this border is actually on top of our drawing, and what we can do is, like when we brought our clone to the top, we can send this to the bottom, and our drawing appears again, because now this box is underneath this, and this has a white, oops, edit undo, this has a white background. Let's take a look at that. Go back to our document properties. I'll put on a checkerboard background so you can see this is actually white. Our background, this only shows the checkerboard, it's not white anymore, so we can distinguish it. This is our piece of art. We can save this file, so I'll click File, Save. I'll go to my Inktober folder, click on Drawings, and I'm going to call this Inktober Cubine. This is my drawing, not my pattern. And save it. And saving it is not the same thing as exporting it so that we can post it on the web. I'll show you one more time, or not one more time, I'll probably show it to you over and over and over again, but we'll export this to the web so that we can post it. And I'll click File, Export PNG Image. We want, this is selected, so it's thinking I want to print out or export my selection, but I don't. I want to export the page. Page is 600 by 600. This is what it's going to name it and where it's going to send it. And again, I don't like that SVG in it. So I'm going to edit this. Also, so it's Inktober Cubine. Apparently it's taking the name from the name of the document. We want it to be PNG, Inktober Cubine PNG. We'll click Save, and then we'll export. And maybe this time I'll prove to you that it's there. Open. And I don't want to be in the Patterns folder. I want to be in the Drawings folder. And here it is. So, that's it for today's lesson.